My dream job absolutely is writing, like writing specifically. And I've always had these like fantastical stories in my mind. I think stories are the vaccine to true life. A vaccine is an introduction of the virus in order to add resistance to that virus. The idea that we can tell a story that has a dragon and it's allegorical for greed, pain, or suffering, or fatalism of like things are always going to end in fire whenever I'm around, like that kind of thing. I've always had a heart for like telling stories that specifically allow you to see yourself in those characters and allow you to see complex situations mixed with like magic or mixed with urban fantasy or mixed with horror or mixed with sci-fi, just because like that stuff is super fun to write, but also because it allows you to like take a step back and get lost in a metaphor, and that's very fun and beautiful.
My guest this week is Lexi McQueen. Lexi is a performer, world builder, and professional dungeon master. She's the creator of Strix U, a tabletop RPG campaign set in the Magic the Gathering universe. Above all else, Lexi is a storyteller. We get deep into Lexi's process, her connection to spirituality, and how she's taking back storytelling for herself. Enjoy. You gotta love the Riverside Countdown. It's very professional, but at the same time, it's a little bit kind of like it's official now, right? So I'm officially in the house with Lexi McQueen. Lexi, how are you?
I'm doing so well. This is gonna be great. I'm very excited.
Probably doing better than your dog, right? You just mentioned that your dog is overdue for a walk or going out.
For a walk, like a very long walk. It's the weekend. Normally we go to like a park or something, and I had a very selfish Saturday, which means I just went out and did everything I wanted to do. But I'll make it up to him tomorrow. Tomorrow's his actual birthday, so.
What does it mean though to have a selfless Saturday or a selfless day as an alternative? Like, are you always doing stuff for other folks or trying to commit to obligations, or what is it?
Yes. That's the simple answer. Yes. Usually my weekends are saying yes to any game that pops up like during the week. If someone's just like, "Hey, I have a spot," or like, "Hey, I'm running a charity thing," or "Hey, you know, I'm a little bored. Can anyone hop on my show?" Anything like that. So usually, selfless Saturdays, selfless Sundays are me just joining anybody else's show. If they need someone, I'm just like, "Yeah, sure. I'm free. I got a couple hours. Why not?"
That's amazing. That generosity is, I think, what keeps creators going, right? Because it's a kind of give and take, right? First of all, thank you for jumping on this show. You know, I don't know what I can offer you, but I just feel like for creators, there's always a good back and forth. We're all in this kind of community, whether it's Magic or RPGs or otherwise. It's good to, what's the term? Give forward, or to pay it forward?
Yeah, pay forward. Yeah, pay it forward. And I think there's also something like, I think from interactions like these, there's nothing anyone could give me that would equate to just like talking to someone about like not even just myself, but what we do, how we do what we do, how creative we are, and what our lives are like as creators. I don't know. I don't think there's a price to that. So I love like if I can help people out in a way that doesn't like sometimes it drains me, but in a way that doesn't like directly drain me, in a way that like actually will benefit them, and in a way where I know I'm gonna have fun. I'm down to clown for just about anything really.
How do you balance the sort of finite amount of energy that we all have? For example, it's great to pay forward, it's great to help out, to jump on someone's stream, but sometimes it can be draining, right? Sometimes you need a little bit of me time, which is what you did today. But how do you balance that?
I mean, I think I'm still learning that a lot because I do say yes to a lot just because I think I can, and then I come to find out the juice might not be worth the squeeze. Like, like by the time I'm tired and I show up to your show, you might not want me on it. But like, I've started to realize and recognize my own boundaries. Thank you, therapy, for that. But like, therapy and having people who love me that also notice when I'm a little bit more on the burnt out side. But I do like to think that I also have a good eye for quality personal time. Um, I have a lot of hobbies, and at any point in time, I can be very in tune with like what is going to fulfill me if I've only got 30 minutes or if I've only got an hour between my regular job and a show I have to do all night. Um, I will make the most of that because most of the time I would just like to be sleeping, but I can't do that because 30 minutes is not enough time to power nap and then wake up and get everything set up. So, um, yeah, I usually try to separate quantity of time versus quality, and really take the time and tell people like, hey, I probably won't be available for this time, because I literally just have to turn off my phone and I'm gonna go knit for 2 hours or I'm gonna go rock climbing, and that's just like how I defend myself. But I'm still learning how to balance.
That's a skill, though, right? Is
Hmm.
squeezing the maximum amount of rest or enjoyment into half an hour. Have you always had that ability, or is it kind of been learned over the years?
It's learned. It's learned. I was a big people pleaser growing up, and I still am a big people pleaser, but I'm more defensive of myself and my time now. But I used to just want to do everything. Like, if someone asked me, it made me more sad to disappoint them that I couldn't do it. So I was a part of a group for like 3 out of 4 of my college years just because, like, it disappointed me to think I couldn't be there for them. When they could have made it on their own, but I knew that I fulfilled a role and I knew that it was going to be a little bit of work trying to replace me. So I just like suffered through it for 3 years. And it's gotten to the point now that I'm like, okay, cannot do this anymore, will not do this. But it took really what it was COVID. Like COVID and that pandemic time where I couldn't do anything. So I had to find how to have alone time and make it fulfilling, um, because no one was asking me to do anything. So it just had to be me. And then I started realizing, oh, my time is actually precious. And my energy is actually precious. And I have to hold on to that. I have to hang on to that. So now it's a muscle that I have.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Was it COVID, or was it maturing, or did COVID accelerate the maturation, or?
Yeah, it was COVID definitely accelerated the maturation because I graduated the last year or the first year COVID hit. So like COVID hit and I hadn't even finished senior year yet. Um and then we got kicked out, had to move home, finished college, graduated, couldn't graduate like in person, so I had to like learn how to validate myself, and then had to find an apartment because I got a job like immediately after college. So it was like that feeling of oh, like normally I would be able to fail a little bit for a couple years before getting here. And I had to quick and in a hurry figure out how to grow up. But yeah, I think it would be a lesson for like 25. Like I think I would be 25 learning that lesson if I could have continued through college. Like
Hey, well, at least you had a mostly normal college experience, at least the first 3 years
oh
pre-COVID,
yeah.
right?
Oh yeah, fairly normal, fairly normal.
And I want to go back a little bit already, which is, where do you think you get your people pleasing tendencies from?
Ooh, definitely my family. It's definitely a family thing. It's definitely a religion thing. I think both growing up, my parents were both Christian. They are still like they own a church. It's a whole thing. But growing up being like a pastor's kid, and then on top of that, like I think being a person of color in a very white America, you like don't want to turn heads. You don't want to raise any flags. So I feel like I felt like it was going to happen no matter what, whether that was through being a person of color or the religion thing. Where my parents, we were traveling to other churches, and I just had to be like the perfect kid. So I feel like the people pleasing definitely stems from there. And I think I'm also a protector. I think like my personality style is like protecting and providing. and it makes me more sad that people don't get what they need in life, even more so what they want. And so if I'm the bridge between someone getting what they want, I would rather just be tired for a couple of hours or be drained for a couple of hours and figure it out and like use my time, but let that person like be on top of the world after that. Like that is like that's a high priority to me rather than like being like, oh well, I don't care what anyone else thinks, I'm just gonna be mean, or like not even that, but even fully claiming my time. Like that's not mean. It's just it's something I have a right to do. But I would rather just like sit with someone and be in their game for like 6 hours or like fly and go do something with someone. I would rather just do that and make someone else's day and find along the way that I actually will have fun than like or find a way to make it fun than to like not be a people pleaser.
Well, they say we're the synthesis of our parents. So what parts of you are like your dad and what parts of you are like your
Oh
mom?
God. The good parts are my mom. No, I'm joking. The good parts, it's good. I think the good thing is that like everything that comprises me and my personality it's a double-edged sword. So like that protective side, that I definitely get that from my dad, but it also comes back to bite me as a defensive personality as well. Like if I feel like someone's attacking me or even my friends, I get defensive before
Right. You're
get
going
to
to
it.
step in, right? Yeah.
Exactly. I gotta step in. I gotta be the body between. And it can make me feel bad if I can't protect people. Um, and that's not good for my own self, like respect. I
And
think
also things are not always in your control, whether the protection is successful or not, right?
exactly.
So,
I think my both my parents are very smart. My mom was a writer. She went to school actually for uh English and journalism. She ended up dropping out because she had my oldest sister, but like she was going to be a writer and she continued that like her entire life. Like she continued doing grant writing and being like a very charitable person and working with nonprofits writing grants. Um and I think I get that from her, but I also think my dad's a big nerd. My mom's a big nerd in a different way. My dad's like a big comics nerd and like superheroes nerd and wants to see the good in everything and wants to always like believe that people are good on the inside, and I think that that's like I get that from my dad. My mom is weird in the sense of like weird nerd kid that was like Lord of the Rings, The Matrix, like oh like something's out there, like, and she had this idea of like people here are bad but there are people out there that are good and like we
mhm.
should, and even in books like that was books are good but people are bad. Like
So did you get your sort of writing or creative tendencies a part of that? Did that come from your mom? Was that the whole influence in the household growing up or
yeah, for sure. um I used to just like, what I have to say, Christian writers are creative. They really have to be creative to get their point across because they gotta have you choose their book over like Star Wars, like a Star Wars chapter book or whatever. So like a lot of what I watched growing up was like fairly creative, out of the box religious content, which is very like now I can laugh and make fun of it, but like a lot of what I think now and the way that I think and even like villains I come up with, stories I come up with, heroes I come up with are rooted in the idea of like not even in religion or anything, but in the idea like not even yeah, I think that they're rooted in things that my mom got for us and books that she would let us read and even her writings. And as I have an older brother and me and him, we grew up and we would write everywhere. Like she still has little like envelopes where we would write on them and little notebooks and whatever else. And it's just like wild the kind of stories we grew up writing without knowing that she was writing those things, and like she came to us and was like, "Hey, I wrote a story similar to that when I was a kid." And it has to come from her completely. But yeah, my dad is a big musician and I get pretty much all of my musical prowess from that. And then my mom loves listening to music, compositional music, and that's like where it diverges. Like playing instruments and stuff, dad. Enjoying music and like being able to talk about the breadth of music and how deep music can go, that's my mom.
Yeah, there's different avenues of creative expression,
Yeah.
and you have been fortunate to tap into both of those from your parents. And at the risk of this being kind of a tangent,
Hmm.
I think it's really interesting what you're saying, which is the fact that, about the Christian stories, and you have what that is. It just made me think that's life, isn't it? Like when you're in it, you don't actually know you're in it, and then once
Yeah.
you get older, you step out of it, you're like, oh, that's what it's like that's what it
Yeah.
is. Or maybe you're really young and you watch The Matrix, you don't see the, what do you call that, like the illusions, you don't
Hmm.
see a
The
lot of
allegory as well.
the allegory, you don't see like maybe even like why your parents recommended certain things to you. Like,
Hmm.
just full disclosure, I wasn't Christian. I grew up Catholic.
Yeah.
I did the whole like altar boy confirmation, like went to church every week, the whole 9 yards. Went to Catholic school, and it's like when I was in it, I didn't think much of it because I was just in it. It was just immersion,
Hmm.
and I have actually don't have that much negativity towards um, religion, even though I'm not fully practicing anymore. But it's just like it's just so fascinating. I mean, it's obvious, but it's so fascinating, like what your parents do and environments they put you in. Like that just sets you up for the rest of your life, uh,
Yeah.
for good and otherwise, right? It's just like when you're in it, you're just the fish in the fishbowl, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I think breaking out of it has definitely been like the biggest part of my life, but also making peace with it as well is like a big deal that a lot of people don't really get to. And I know I'm going to spend the rest of my life like making peace with whatever, but at the same time, like everyone is searching and everyone's also in a condition that they don't know about. Like in that same exact thing, we're all like this, even though you can take a step back and be like, oh, what was that? You're just stepping back into another fishbowl. Like you're just flopping into a bigger fishbowl and
It's
then you'll
like
flop out of
Inception.
that one.
There's yeah, yeah.
Exactly. It's just going to keep going. Um, and there's like I think that there are people on earth who believe like you can backflip out into nothingness and suddenly you're like in a consciousness of all things that you've ever been a part of and all things everyone is a part of and you're able to elevate to that space. I don't know. I'm still in a fishbowl, so I can't speak on that, but
Yeah. Did your dad drop comical references into the sermons? Like, because I
yes. Yeah,
okay,
so many like movies. Like we couldn't watch a movie without him being like this could be a sermon, and me and my brother would be like, can you stop? Like this is fully Madagascar 2. Like you have to stop. We can't, there's nothing salvageable here. But like so many references would be in like sermons and things like that, and it's definitely a running joke between us now.
mhm.
um
But
if
to
we
be
want,
fair, I mean that's his worldview. So it's like
for
everything has to be
sure.
through that lens, right?
Yeah, it's very funny. If we want a movie to be safe from them being like, how can we turn this into a sermon? We make the joke about it being turned into a sermon first. And then my parents are like, okay, fine, I'll leave it alone. Like, fine, like you think you're funny, and then they just don't think about it, and I'm like, we saved it. We can enjoy Atomic Blonde. We can enjoy The Hobbit. Like we can enjoy these movies again. But also it's still very fun to talk about like religion and faith-based ideas surrounding some of the movies and music and TV shows and things happening today. It's still very like me and my mom are able to sit down and have a very like intelligent conversation because it's not it's I don't know. I think like depending on the way you go about it, especially theologically, you could be very informed and very intelligent about how you perceive the world in a way that's not in a way that's acknowledging your fishbowl.
Mm.
um and that makes for such like beautiful conversation, I think.
Are you spiritual today? Do you believe in a higher power?
Mm,
What's your point of view on that?
I think I believe in something greater, but I think I believe more so that the focus being on that greater thing distracts from where we are now. So I'm more of
Mm.
a like philosophy person. Like I am more of a, if I drill in on like My dream is that I drill in so much on how do you live the good life so much. Like I drill in on like how do I make this matter and does this matter and if I do this does this make me a good person? And thinking about those things so much that I unlock like a little puzzle box where I'm like unlocking a new puzzle and then hopefully one day I will click it and it will open and it's like you did it. Like you figured it out. Um just because, and I know that's like I think it's a very selfish view, but I think like I can't have anybody else's experiences, so I have to figure out my own and figure out if I'm doing harm or doing good. And so I think I'm not really spiritual. I'm spiritual, but not religious in that sense, where I'm like, I think something's out there, but I don't think they're put like to rely on something is taking away from the thing I have in front of me, which is my own life, my own actions. So.
There's something really interesting about the nature of being selfish or
Mm-hmm.
self-centered versus selfless.
Mm-hmm.
I've sort of come around to the fact that we do need to just sometimes be selfish and do things for ourselves, because in the aggregate, I feel like if we all do things for ourselves, hopefully the aggregate result is actually good. Like, it's
Yeah.
not saying that you should never worry about your neighbors or whatever the Bible uh, is
Totes.
supposed to
Yeah.
tell you to do, but there you need to still optimize for the self, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's this. Okay, this is gonna be really weird. There's this anime right now that I'm obsessed with, and it's called Blue Lock, and it's a soccer anime. I do not watch sports anime. I don't enjoy. I think it's hard to make it matter to me, because I'm a big stakes person, which is why I like Lord of the Rings, which is why like you get to the point where it's the fate of the world. It is Frodo and Mount Doom, and if he does not drop the ring, it's the end of the world. Like you've got one moment to change humanity forever. Love big stakes. This show turns the tides on that, and it explores what it is like not to be selfish or selfless, but to be an egoist. And like that sounds weird because at first you're like, that doesn't sound good. Like your ego is not good. And especially people who've had traditional like psychology training, you have your like ego versus your id and like all of those kinds of things. And people, even the word egotistical, these words have like very
Have a
negative
negative
connotations.
connotation. Yeah.
Yeah. But like this show explores what is it like to in the optimal moment choose best for yourself first before you consider anyone else. And like that sounds bad, but it's not saying don't, like you said, don't consider, like don't stop considering other people, don't harm other people. But like if your dream was right in front of you and your mind goes to, oh, but someone else would like it first, you're not doing good to yourself. And like that's also not good. But people don't always think about that. And so making the choice that like puts you in the place where you can achieve your dreams, but also still be considerate for the other people around you and create collaboration and teamwork around you. I think that's like the kind of life I am trying to achieve, because I think if it came down, if someone handed me my dream job, I would second guess whether or not I was fit for it, whether or not someone else should have been asked first. And then if I got the job, I'd be like comparing myself to everyone who had been in the job before, or even like anyone who could be in the job after me. And I'd be pushing myself so hardcore when I could just like be an egoist for a second, get the job and trust myself and like trust that I've made the best decision in the moment and that I will continue to make the best decisions for me and to do zero harm or do like the least amount of harm.
Right.
Um just because like I think people pleasers and yeah, anyone who's like a people pleaser, you were considering everyone else and everyone else's options before your own. And to have that kind of flipped, like I said, it sounds wild to be like consider yourself, but it's not consider yourself always. It's consider yourself in the moments where that goal is right in front of you. No other time do you have to do that, but like in where it's right in front of you, think about yourself. And I think those moments are hinge points for everyone where you like literally could make a decision to, oh, I'm going to move to a different state, or like I am going to say yes to this partner, or I am going to say yes to buying this house, or I am going to go all in on like cutting my hair or like whatever. But those are usually hinge points in our life, and whether or not we decide to do what's best for us or best for other people, that can literally define an entire era of your life. Um, yeah, I don't know. The selflessness, I think there's a balance where you have to be mostly selfless and then do some selfish things, because selfish doesn't always mean inconsiderate or bad.
Mhm. It
But
can also just be a net good because maybe, like you said, like you're taking on the new job, like there needs to be a certain amount of self-assuredness or
mm-hmm.
confidence about yourself and not comparing yourself to those who have come before, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
There needs to be a kind of self, almost like a self clarity,
Yeah.
so that you can identify the goals. Because what you mentioned about the hinge points is also key. Like, I want to ask you, like, how do you identify the hinge points in your life? Like, some people, they see something in front of them, they don't actually know it's in front of them.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard because I don't think I've come to a lot of them yet, but I think the few that I have, I feel it very deep in my gut. Like I get this feeling, oh, my life is about to change. And I feel it like the day before something big is going to happen. Or like if I get an email about something and I feel very, very strongly about it, I will like not be able to not think about that thing, because for me in my mind, I know like, oh, this is a hinge point. Um the first hinge point being like the very first magic thing that I did. I decided to go out and do it, and it turned out to be a full not good situation. But like after that, having people reach out to me and comfort me and like let me know like, hey, this is not how everyone is. And the moment that someone else reached out to me and was like, hey, like I could have absolutely been like, oh, this taught me about everything I need to know about the magic community. I'm done. But I didn't. And I knew it was a hinge point, and I knew that I needed to think about, okay, this is one person compared to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who play Magic. And how many of those people have ill intent for humanity? Very few, hopefully. Like a very small amount compared to the people who just want to enjoy the game. And it became a moment where I had to think and drill into it, and saying yes was not like, it was not an easy thing to do, but I had to. And from that moment, like that was a hinge point where it blossomed into me going to like LA to do more things, and pivoted into even more opportunities for tabletop, even more opportunities for Magic, and it's just been that ever since. But I felt it so deeply, like I had to think about it before I could even say yes, and be like, what's going on? Like I feel like I can't breathe, and it's just a text. Like it's just a text. What's going on here? And it's, or even like moving. I went home for COVID and had to decide to get an apartment. It was a very, very long, grueling process where I had to really think about like, am I going to do this? Is this something I'm okay with? It would I not save more money by staying home? Should I just wait? Should I just whatever? And it was like, it took me a long time. But then I also get this impulse, like after I lament about it for like a little bit, and then I get an impulse where I'm like, I have to say yes right now. If I don't say yes right now, it will never happen. Um, and it's funny because I'm talking for a long time, but it's funny because I rock climb, and I used to have a very big fear of heights, and I still do have a fear of heights, a little bit, but like the difference between the first time I try a route and being afraid of heights and the time where I get it is usually a quick breath and don't think about it, just impulse. Like I think about the height for so long that at some point I literally have to and go and keep going, and I can get it. But it takes so much thinking, and then stop the thinking, go.
That's so interesting because typically and I'm only speaking from personal experience, when I'm nervous or have anxiety about something, um, maybe it is similar. It's like it is like you're not supposed to not think about it. You
Mhm.
actually do think about it, and for me, it's always about the negative visualization. Like
Mhm.
you say to yourself, like, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe a terrible example with context to heights, because I'm talking about like going to a presentation or something. That's a totally different,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
But uh, that's why I want to dig into it. Is like that sounds so hard. Is like to have a fear of heights and still get past it. But you said you basically think about it and then you stop thinking about it. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Like I have to yell at myself not to overthink. And sometimes it's this is also lending to that,
That's
like,
the whole like too self-aware and kind of thing.
yes, I'm way too self-aware because I think my mind goes, what's the worst thing that could happen? What's the best thing that could happen? And I have to sit there and think about everything I could possibly do. Everything, and I'll go try other stuff even. I think about so much and I overthink, and it's to the point that it like truly can claim my mind. It can overtake my mind to the point that I will go home and feel terrible that I didn't finish the route because I know the only thing standing between me and finishing the route. It had, especially if it has nothing to do with muscle, if it has nothing to do with skill, it has to do with me and one final hold and the height of like looking down and being like, how am I coming down? And
Mm.
it's very interesting because like my dad told me this story about me when I was a child, where on 4th of July, I was a kid, he put me on his shoulders and the fireworks were going off. And halfway through the fireworks, he looks up and I'm bawling my eyes out. And he's like, what's wrong? And I was crying because I was enjoying. And at the second it flipped and I was like, how am I going to get down? And I got so anxious about how I was going to get down
Oh.
off his shoulders that I couldn't enjoy anything. So he had to stop. Like he was trying to figure out what's going on. I'm bawling my eyes out. Fireworks are going off. I'm sensitive to sound, so it's like a whole thing. He takes me off his shoulders, and then he's like, "It's just like this," and he does it, and I'm like, "Oh." It was just like that's what it is like. It's like overthinking, overthinking, overthink. Enjoy, enjoy, enjoy. Overthink. I'm frozen. I'm stuck. And I found now that I've matured and I've gotten old enough to clarify what that feeling is, I can just like fully like take a deep breath or like do it when I can't think about it. Like I'm in the middle of a thought, interrupt, or have other people start talking and then interrupt it and go and do my thing because I can't literally cannot allow myself the like I have to cut off the veins of overthinking, before it even gets to me. But it's wild. It's a very wild thing, and I think it's impossible, especially if you have anxiety. I think it's impossible not to overthink. Even if you aren't making the smartest decision, you're still overthinking about the not smart decision, such as climbing while having a fear of heights. Like, not smart, but I still do it.
How often do you climb now? It's like once a week or a couple times a week, or
Couple of times now. I did it a lot in college and then COVID hit, and I just kept paying because I was like, I don't want this place to shut down. And then it didn't shut down, and I've been going back with friends. Like I found a really good community to go with, and now I've been going like about 2 or 3 times a week, which is really fun. But yeah, it's
how
a
long have you
humbling.
been doing it? Is it like have you did you grow up kind of a very active sporty person, and this is like one of several
No.
things you've tried, or
No, not at all. I grew up, my parents would not let me do sports because, like, I tried doing track once and I had, like, an asthma attack and I didn't have asthma. Like, I just couldn't breathe. And they were like, what is going on? Like, I had to go to the hospital for the whole thing. I'm perfectly fine. And I turned out fine. But I just, like, was not an athletic kid. Um, and so they were like, no, like you can't do sports because you're gonna break your legs, you're gonna not be able to breathe or
okay? So
something.
you are not Serena Williams. Got
No,
it.
absolutely not. I wanted so badly to be, so badly. I did want to try sports growing up, but it was just like a lack of resources and like all of the and then them being afraid. Oh, cat.
Yeah, that's Burger. He's
So lovely.
always trying to get my attention. We have two.
Screen
There's
time.
yeah, screen time.
Oh my
He's always
gosh.
getting in the background, which is great.
That's
So
amazing. Yeah, I think I didn't grow up sporty. I grew up playing music and like playing outside and stuff. And the extent that I did stuff was like I would go through like a ninja phase or like a spy phase where I was just like watching as many movies pertaining to and then being like, I'm coming up with a training routine on how to do that. And it was just like me climbing a fence, like going up and down the fence a bunch and then running around my house as many times as possible, like a little maniac as a kid. Um, but as I got older, I started doing oh my god, I started doing like a competitive dance thing. It's like competitive singing and dancing. And it was super fun. I did that through high school, but like that was the extent, musical theater, and that was like the extent of like athleticism as I went. It really took me like getting out of the house, going to college to be like, oh, I can just go to a park and kick a soccer ball around. Like I can just do that. That'd be very fun. Um, yeah. now.
So, what were some of the hinge points for you in college? Did you have any?
Ooh, yeah. Um, there was like there was definitely probably about two. And the first was probably like leaving a relationship I should not have been in, but I was so comfortable, and it was very messy, specifically because I ignored the hinge point so many times. Like it's like ignoring an exit you're supposed to go, and you keep seeing more exits. It's like, hey, it'll take you to the same place. It's just a little bit more time, a little bit more energy, and I kept ignoring it. And then I finally did it, and it was very like a very messy fallout because of how obvious it should have been. And I have this rule for myself now, not even a rule, but just a saying now, that the longer you wait to learn a lesson, the more expensive it is. Expensive being both like money aside, time, energy, age, like truly you just start, even like people, like all of those things, the longer you go to learn a lesson of like respect, or a lesson of claiming your time and like being cognizant of your own self, the more you've gone without learning that lesson, and you just like spent, okay, well, it took me from ages 21 to 29 to learn that lesson, and I've wasted 8 years living my life like that. Now what do I got to do? Or now what can I do? So that was a lesson that was like very, very, very expensive, but uh definitely leaving that was a big hinge point. And then there was another hinge point where it was specifically like having to do with like jobs after college. And it was an internship that I did not think that I could even do. Like I went to college for computer science, and I am not the best coder in the world, but I do love coding. Um and I love learning a lot, and I love like coming up with projects and doing passion projects and stuff. And I went for this internship, and I was like, the interview felt pretty good because I'm like a good talker. Like I love talking to people, and I can be very like I love just being amicable.
Personable.
Yes,
I get that.
exactly, exactly. But I was like, I just don't know if my coding ability is gonna get me through, but I'm gonna go for it anyway. And there was like two spots for this internship, and I was like, oh, there's so many other students like in my class that would be good for this. Everyone else would be good for this. Nobody, like literally anyone else but me. Like the only good thing about me out of like everyone else, there's a couple people in my class that were like actually personable, but a lot of computer science kids are like very like nerds. They are,
I study computer science, so I know where you're coming from.
yeah. And so it's like I was like literally the only thing distinguishing me from all of the other people is that I like to code in my downtime as like a passion thing, even though I'm not good at it, and that I can talk to people. And that's like literally what ended up getting me my internship, which then got me a job, which then got me the job after college. And it's like I felt that like it was like a whole weekend of like it was an interview on Friday, and then they were like, we'll let you know by Monday or something like that. And I could not like eat, sleep the entire weekend because I was just like, this is gonna be big. Like I feel like this is bigger than I'm making it out to be. And I had three jobs in college, so it's like it's not like this was my first job or anything. Um,
But it's
but
something different now. This is new.
yeah, it truly felt different. It felt career defining, and it felt like defining for myself. Like I knew that not only would it show everyone else like I think I am worth it, but also it proved to myself you are pretty good at coding, or like you are better than you think, or you're really not failing at this college thing. Like you're
Yeah.
actually doing a good job.
You're meeting the bar, if not higher.
Yeah, and I
Yes.
knew encountering this situation, either way, it would have sent me feeling either really bad about myself, and I would still have to learn the lesson of like being able to talk myself like into believing how good I was, or I was going to leave being confirmed in something that I didn't think before, which was that I was good at what I do. And so it was like one of those things. It's a hinge point because I was like, I'm gonna leave this with one of two beliefs about myself,
Something's
and
gonna happen here. Yes.
something's gonna change. Yeah. So I think those were the main two. College was definitely it was an interesting time for me where I was blossoming and growing, and I wasn't really going out of my way to try new things for a very long time. Um and those were like the main things. When I got to the end of college, I could really feel myself like literally blossoming just because I was just like, oh my God, like I can drink. Like I can drink now. Wow. This is wild. Or even just being like, I have a car. I can just go places. I can drive to the closest city and just see what is there.
This is like the real world equivalent of like having new powers, right? It's
Yeah,
like you have leveled up. So
exactly. I'm like, whoa, I can do this now. Like, or even I always had the ability to do this, but like I
mhm.
can really commit to it
But
now.
now you know kung fu. Now you've
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah.
so I've got to ask, at what point did you officially come out to your family, to your friends? Was that during college? Was it before, or how did that work?
It's during college, which was scary, and it was like a year
Wait, was that a
after.
hinge point? I don't know
It
if it
was a
was.
hinge point. It was definitely a hinge point. I definitely felt that. I should have said that as my hinge point because that's like a big one. But I think it happened between college. Like it was a summer between things. Or summer between like
So off
sophomore and
season.
junior year. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Off season. So I was just like I kind of I don't know. It was a weird experience where I was like, okay, literally something's gonna happen here. Something's gonna change here. And I think fortunately for my family and for me, my family is still very like religious, and we had gone through some experiences I was not okay with, having to do with like homophobia and stuff like that like my parents were not perpetuating, but like my family did, and they were there and they were silent. So I was like, hey, this is not cool. Even before I knew anything about myself, I was like, this doesn't feel good to be a part of. Um but coming out to my parents, it happened after like a year after I broke up with the person from the first hinge point. And it was just something I was like, hey, I want you to know that happened and this is who I am, and um you know, love you. Love you so much. I can't change anything about it. I really wish that I could. Um but this is just a journey that I've been going on, and I would love for you to be a part of it with me. And my mom did the thing like everyone does, like not everyone's parents, but like a lot of people go through and they're like their parents are like, yeah, we knew. But my mom kind of took that where she was like, I already knew, and also like I love you no matter what. Um my dad took it a little harder, but I don't know. I don't think it's I think the thing is you will spend the rest of your life coming out to people like every single day. And I don't think it's I think it's important that they accept me, and they have accepted me, but I think it's also something that like it was a hinge point because I knew like just something was going to change. Like I was still living with them during this like period of downtime. I had a job, but I was like using their car to get to and from the job. It was one of those things that I was like, I'm still very dependent on them. And so to say
Mhm.
something right now, like, why should I say something right now? But it was a thing deep in my heart. I was like, I know I have to say something. I know I have to speak up about this.
Mhm.
Um, and it
So
definitely
was it
changed.
similar? Was
Yeah.
it similar to other situations where you just felt like, okay, I can't let this go unsaid any longer?
Yes. And I do that a lot. I do that a lot where I get very fed up with like not saying something, or I get very fed up with myself, like how it feels to have that truth in me and not share it with other people. Mostly because I think it's unfair. Um, and that comes from a position of like privilege when it comes to like, I know my parents would not like react like violently or kick me out of their house or anything like that. That is not the same for a lot of queer people. But I knew that that was out like when we think of like in our minds, okay, what's the best thing that could happen and what's the worst thing that could happen? I
Mhm.
knew I could at least get rid of that as like a worst thing that could happen.
Mhm.
Um, but like I think
There's still
this,
that uncertainty. It doesn't matter,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
whether what you're, to say it bluntly, like what your min max is in terms of
Mm-hmm.
like best case, worst case.
Exactly.
There's always going to be that uncertainty. And are you just inside? Are you going to be? Am I going to be accepted?
Yeah.
That's who I am.
Yep. Because I think that's the biggest thing. That's always been my thing. Like, even when I was the little like pastor's kid, Like it wasn't everything that I did, and I think I struggle now. Like I am a master, like I am a jack of all trades, master of none, and that is specifically because like growing up, I wanted to juggle so many different things because I wanted to find something new and shiny that I could do that could catch their attention because I wanted them to accept me. And it's like now I'm an adult and I'm like, okay, the reason I can't be quiet about this is because I want them to accept me and I want them to love me and I don't want a day to go by. I don't want them something to happen to either of them and they didn't know who I was truly. Um and that's definitely a very like sensitive thing and something not a lot of people think about and something that people think about and don't like want. Like there are people in my family that I'm like, you don't have to know anything about me. You have no right to know who I am truly. And like that's something I've come to learn. But for them, the two of them specifically, how integral they were to my like upbringing and growing up, it's just been very, very, it was very formative in that moment.
Yeah. I can tell that even though, you're very candid about it now, but I can still tell that as you're recalling going back in time, there's the emotions are just coming out again, right?
Yeah.
You're just presenting yourself well right now, but I can definitely tell at the time it was not. It was a lot harder.
It was a very big deal. Especially I was the good kid. Like I was the air quotes good kid. Like I was the oh, I'm going to college. I'm like getting all A's and I'm never skipping class and I'm doing all of these things and I did the major they wanted me to do. Like I was like for sure computer science was like 46% my idea. Everything else was
Okay.
like family, parents, whatever. So it was like that thing where I was doing literally everything normal. I was still a part of like Christian groups because I was like, I still want to donate my time in this way. And I still, at that point in time, like believed in that and still was very involved. Um, but it just was something where I was like, why?
Mhm.
Why? And I had to just do the thing. I had to do the thing that was the hardest in the moment. But like I said, me and my mom are like my parents were like very close and me and my mom are able to have very very structured conversation. And like one of the biggest things that we've done is like I was like, "Hey, I don't know if I can be a part of the religious part of your church, but I do think that you have the space for a community center." And we were able to start a diaper bank and they like hit like a million diapers this last year where they were able to give out that many
Oh
diapers to
wow.
the community. Yeah. And it's just one of those things I'm like, "Okay, that could have never happened if I didn't have that conversation." And if they
Mhm.
didn't know someone so close to them, and they absolutely shouldn't have to, it shouldn't have to be like, oh, someone close to me is having going through this situation, which is why I'm able to empathize. But like, there's just a lot about our everyday lives that like without empathy and without like being exposed to some of those things, like it truly, especially in Ohio, like I don't know, like I make that excuse for my parents only because it's Ohio. Outside of that, I'm like, no, like it's very hard to not see how the world is going. Um, but yeah, I think it was definitely a hard point in time, but it was a hinge point and it changed everything and it made a lot of things harder, but it also made a lot of things easier and I wouldn't be able to be where I am today if I hadn't have done it.
The harder thing was it at that point that you broke off from the church, or is it more complicated than that?
I think it's a little more complicated because I didn't break off from the church for a while. Like a very long while. Like I was still going to church. I was still trying I was testing out new churches, like driving to a new church every Sunday because I would sit and hear and listen and enjoy what I was hearing and stuff like that. And then it would get to that fateful day where they're like gay people bad and I was like, "Okay, cool. I got to go. Can't be here."
All right, I'm out. Yeah.
Exactly. And I was just like, "Okay." And I think that there's a part of me that's still like and also just started seeing like a lot of the institutions that the capital C church partakes in outside.
Mhm.
It's not just the institution of church, they're also participating in capitalism. And then I had to think about myself and be like, okay, would the guy that walks around the Bible be okay with capitalism? Let's ask that question. Because he went to a marketplace and flipped over tables because he was like, this is not chill. So,
If he
like,
came back tomorrow and he saw this,
what would
WWJD,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Literally.
And
So,
it's like you don't have to be religious or faithful to think about like, okay, does this like what who benefits from this? And I took a very sociological like viewpoint on the church and stepped back. That took a super long time. And that group that I was in for 3 years, like that was a church group that I was playing. I was literally singing in the worship band and playing guitar for them because I was so like I was so clinging to that life that I had before, and I felt bad leaving it alone, and I also felt bad making them go find someone new, and I didn't want them to know what was going on, but I also knew I wouldn't be accepted. Like first year and a half there I was like having a good time, but then it just hit me. I was like, wait, nobody else here would like me if I truly told them who I was. And it just the facade
That
started
just
to
hits you
crumble.
like a ton of bricks or something,
Exactly.
right?
Immediately started to crumble, especially because like there was just a part of me. This talk is getting so personal and I love it. There was a part of me that was
This is
like,
why I do it, so I hope you're
"Oh
okay with
yeah,
it.
I love it." Like I think with religion a lot of people feel like they will like be resorted to tears because of like how they perceive God to move in them. And I always found that like when I was playing, when I was singing, I would inspire those reactions in people. And I was like, so what's the difference? Like none of you know who I truly am, and you're still able to feel that. But the second that I tell you something's going to change for you, and it's not me, and it's not capital G God. It's you and your
It's your
perception.
response to it.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And I was like, so then how much of the reaction to God and like what people are saying God wants and things like that, how much of that is the personal human reaction and perception of like what they perceive God wanting of them? You know? And I don't know. I don't ever want to invalidate people's experiences, and I'm not one to be like Christianity shouldn't exist. I think the institution of church has some work to do. I think individuals, everyone's on a journey somewhere, and we will all find the end of our journey, hopefully with a life that we're proud of. And if that includes Christianity, if that includes Buddhism, if that includes Zoroastrianism, like whatever it is, perfect. But I think for me, it just got to the point that everything started crumbling. And I was like, the second you look at this, like the second my perception and my eyes looked at this, anyone else probably couldn't convince them. And I'm not trying to convince anyone, but I think like for me in my experience, I started looking at these things and being a little bit more critical, and what was surrounding me started to crumble. And I just couldn't like lie to myself anymore. I couldn't spark inspiration or like feel joy anymore because I would just immediately feel, oh, someone's gonna turn. And I think that's definitely persisted in the Christian church, not everywhere. Um, because like I said, I've been philosophizing, and like I read a lot of philosophy. I read a lot about like what people think, if God is real or not, and what people think, and like what people think God should and shouldn't be able to do, and if God is real, what does he say about Facebook? Like things like that, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Um, but it's interesting because like I feel like Judaism does a great job of like establishing a relationship with God that isn't a facade, like doesn't feel like a facade. I think I think Buddhism, Islam, like all of these other people, like everyone else has found that like your experience on this earth matters, and like doing no harm while
Mm.
you're on this earth matters. And it felt to me like the Christian church like ignored that and wanted to ignore that and consistently continues to ignore that. And that's not, like I said, individuals, it's just like capital C institutional thing. And I don't know. I just could, especially growing up as a pastor's kid, gave me a specific perspective of like being behind the scenes, being behind the closed doors as a child, and everyone thinks you're gonna forget, and you don't. You never do. Things like that that I'm like, I feel like I have a little bit more perspective than most people. And for me to choose to divert, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm not doing it baselessly of like, oh, I just want to go drink and have fun. Like I can do that anywhere at any point in time while partaking in any religion I want. But I think it just mattered a lot that I had been behind closed doors and found joy in the capital C church for a long time and just had to break off. So I feel like it definitely was a little bit more complex, complicated. I think telling them was the hardest thing. I will say I wasn't afraid of like what they would do, because like I said, I'm a very protective, defensive person, and at that point I was like, I need to protect me. Um but after that, it took a while to break off the piece of me that was like, hey, I'm not participating in this anymore. But here's what I will do. Here's how I will support you, because I still love that you believe, and I love that that allows you to love like fully. That gives you this power to love fully. Like, continue doing what you do, but here's where I'm going to partake from. And we still have a lot of debates, but they're never in a harmful way that's like I'm trying to change your mind. It's just usually information, like figuring out what does this actually mean, and like what do we do? Because at the end of the day, if you're really pursuing it, it should be more of a philosophy thing. Like, it should be a philosophy of life rather than a thing you do, like, or a thing that you use to, almost like a number, if that makes sense, like a thing you use to numb everyday life by being like, well, it doesn't matter because this truth exists. And it's like, why don't you drill in on the truth and do more to like figure it out? Because no one can deny it if you find out the truth and it's actually there. Like, everyone's looking for that. So like, you should do the work and try to find it yourself. But it's definitely a
I,
complex thing.
I'm nodding along so much in this conversation because I feel like there are just so many parallels.
Mm-hmm.
Like I grew up in Canada. I was born in Taiwan. I live in mainland China now. But
Mm-hmm.
in some ways, I feel like our experience, we're different gender, but I feel like in some ways, like there are some there are some similarities. Like for
Yeah.
example, I still struggle with this. It's like the role of the institution of religion, whether it's Catholicism or
Mm-hmm.
Christian worship. Like I'm very much like, maybe this comes from thinking about things a lot, which I know you do as well. Is I tend to both sides a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
because I think on the one hand we shouldn't support structures that are very binary, like black and white, like this
Mm-hmm.
is good, this is evil. But on the other hand, I think there's something very comforting in comfort. There's
Yeah.
something very comforting in that community. There's a world that existed way before us, before we were alive, held up over centuries, millennia, where this brought people together. And
Mm-hmm.
this made people, whether you believe it's an objective truth or not, it made them happy. It made them feel like they were part of something.
Yeah.
And we can't deny that this thing made us who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for me to sit here and just be like, today I'm going to reject everything. Like,
Yeah.
I don't go to church, I'm not practicing, but I see a lot of validity in that.
Yep.
And I see that it brings people together. I've been to, my friends who have Christian worship. I've been to some of their events,
Yeah.
and they're great people. And one of my best friends is Christian,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't really talk about church, but he's a great person. So
Mm-hmm.
I can't really like just sit here and just say like church bad,
Mm-hmm.
n- you know, other stuff good. Like
Yeah.
it's so hard for me to sit here and say that. And I think that's also the one thing you said in another interview, which is like the great thing about being a dungeon master or like doing content or storytelling is that you are trying to teach people that things are nuanced, things are complicated,
Mm-hmm.
things are not Twitter takes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's so like, I know I'm kind of rambling now, but it's like
No, it's
there's so much relatable things with what you just said.
yeah. And I think like at the end of the day, my brain wants to I would rather like, if the individual is doing harm, criticize the individual. But the institution is usually doing harm, which the institution is allowing. Like, institution
Yeah.
and system is
Institution
allowing.
is consisted of certain individuals or individuals who are in power, which then form the basis for what
Exactly.
happens.
Like,
Yeah.
if you think of Christianity or anything like that, like as an MLM, like what's it called? Multi
Multi-level
marketing.
marketing.
Yeah, where it's a pyramid scheme and there's people at the top criticizing the people at the top who are benefiting the most. You wouldn't go up to a person who is struggling to take care of their children and saw it as a new opportunity to make separate income, and now they're just trying to do it because like the studies have shown, MLMs and pyramid schemes in general are usually made up of like a white elite and then a bunch of people of color at the bottom who are all trying to make it work because they are pandered and told, like, not pandered to, but they are basically told this can be different for you. Like, you've got this, you've got some spark that will make you different. And it's like, it is no one at the bottom's fault that they were pulled into this because they saw an opportunity, they found comfort, they like any of that kind of stuff. It is the people at the top's fault for creating a system that makes those people at the bottom do what they have to do. So I think in my mind, I don't judge individual. Like, I have friends who are Christian. I don't judge them at all if they aren't doing harm, because I think in the end, like, the capital C church used to be the place where, like, during the civil rights era, people would go to hear about where they were striking next and where you were boycotting next and where the next movement was going to happen, where the next riot was going to happen. It wasn't, like you said, it brought people together, and it wasn't always surrounding the idea of Christ or God or anything like that. It was social and communal good. And so at the end of the day, it was a community,
basically.
Exactly. Yeah. It was a community. And it does not help that though there was community there were always people in the back standing over those communities ready to, like, push it in the direction they want it to go. And there's always someone who's benefiting from people getting together and doing that kind of stuff. I think, like, I am way more willing to criticize an institution, a company, a business, and a structure than I am to criticize anyone individually, because I think the system is doing way more harm than the individual is doing. If the individual is doing any harm at all, if the person is there for me to critique right in front of them, I'm gonna call them out. But, like, I think in general, like, all I can do is go to my parents and be like, and go to the people that they talk to and be like, hey, are you doing anything in your community? Like, do people, like, you have a big church you could go, or not even big, but, like, you have a pretty interesting place. You could have kids camps. You could have, like, a place where kids can go and get food. You can have a place where people go and watch movies, and like, homeless shelters. You can do diaper banks, whatever. Like, all I can do is make sure that they're changing in that way. But I think overall, like, I don't know. I think I'm responsible for the overall good. But I think that there's also a part to it too that is just, like, usually people are just doing what's best for them, and what's comforting to them. Usually. Yeah. There are so many harmful people out there, but there are also just a lot of people that want to self-soothe and use religion as a tool of self-soothing, and that's perfectly fine. Like I said, like I said, we're all on a journey, and, like, we just want to have a comfortable pillow to lay our head on, and, like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Religion's complicated. Hard, so
yeah, it's good to have those things that to anchor yourself, whatever they may be. I struggle with it though, because I think you kind of touched on it. There's a whole question of, like, complicitness, right? Mm-hmm. When you participate in it, even if you're doing it by your own good intentions and you're trying to come at it with the right intention, you're still complicit in certain structures or institutions, right? Whether it's, like, to use some examples, like whether it's in the church, whether it's playing a tabletop RPG that is created by maybe a corporate entity that you don't necessarily agree with their values, whether it's being on, like, a streaming platform that, like, you may not agree with some of its values. So it's like, how do you see all that? Maybe from more like a creator perspective, like, are there things that make it hard for you?
Definitely. I think every single day you have to balance with, like I really love the show The Good Place, because it talks about, like, the idea that we're all doing harm implicitly. Like, we aren't thinking about, like, the clothes on our backs, or the like, the fact that, like, something we did inadvertently led to something else bad happening, and what if all of that were tallied up, and could anyone ever really go to, like, the good place? Like, no one could ever really go to the good place, because even if you're going out of your way to be Nobel Peace Prize winner, there are some heads you have to step on to get to the Nobel Peace Prize winner. And are you, like, is anybody actually really good? And all we can do is care for each other day to day. So it's, like, it's really hard, because I think with companies especially in content creation, one, I don't think humans are meant for content creation. I think this is a very new thing, and just like celebrity-dom, like finding, like, celebrity status stuff, nobody's meant to deal with that.
I'm nodding along so hard to this right
Yeah.
now.
And this is like something I've examined a lot recently. And there's this podcast I listen to called Overthink, and always overthinking,
That
you
sounds like
know.
something I should listen to as
Yeah.
well.
And
That's me.
they take modern topics and dissect it philosophically. And they talked recently about influencers and whether or not influencers are good or bad and whatever. And it's like, sadly, I sit in the pocket of people who are in other people's eye, and
Yeah.
I am someone, I do like that, but I also understand there's so much backlash to that. And not even just backlash. I hate that word because it sounds like so like pretty boy, like, oh, there's, if I say something, there's going to be backlash. I don't care about backlash. I care about
Yeah.
harm. And like,
Yeah.
for
Or
example, like,
long-term effects on people, right?
exactly. Like, I think Bad is a company that makes money off of people of color, or even like, I think to an extent there
You
are
mean in an exploitive sense, right?
exploitative
Maybe.
sense, yes. Like, I think WotC is a wonderful, not wonderful. I think WotC has made something wonderful, and the people inside WotC have made something wonderful with D&D, with Magic. And I love to partake in those things. I think where the line is drawn for me, like where I think I would say there is absolutely nothing here, is if I could not find any personal joy and I could not bring any personal joy to anyone else with those things. So the whole point of homebrewing and coming up with your whole thing is, I'm going to detach from the original idea and just use the bones, because there are stories to be told and there are fantasies to be lived, fantasies that, yeah, there are a billion other systems, there are a billion other ways to go about it. And believe me, I think everyone who said that, it's funny because people say that a lot, like, oh, just play something other than D&D. I have. And I'm trying. I'm actively trying. There's not enough time in the day to play every single system. But like the fact that it's analog, like people know it, and we can make deeply impact, like the amount of streamers, like look at the most popular D&D streamers and the most popular, like even Dimension 20. Those people, they're not all white people, like rich white people. So like it would be different if all rich white people were benefiting off of this game. Most of the people who are streaming D&D and most of the people who are benefiting from D&D are, I mean, there's obviously like one group, but like everyone else usually queer. Like Dimension 20 is a perfect example. You have, oh, yeah, like white guy at the top of it, but then there's like literally everyone else is queer or neurodivergent, or like some even like age differences. There's like just so much diversity. And
Mhm.
people who are streaming kind of lower, like we're not streaming huge $1 million productions, but those people who are streaming and just like choosing to go live every Wednesday or like Tuesday or whatever, and they're telling their impactful, deep stories with their friends that are changing their lives and giving themselves the vaccine for everyday life by like introducing these hard things in a fantastical way. That's not something that a company can rip away from me. And that's something I could, if I couldn't do that, then I would walk away, because there's no point, because I've lost the point of all of storytelling in general, which is to tell a story that resonates with me, that resonates with others, and changes our hearts, or at least like touches our hearts. Um, and there's just like so little these days that is able to do that. Um, that is straight out of a crock pot. Like you get it out of like straight out of the book. Like you really have to touch these things and really interact with story. So I think like even with a content creation thing, it's that idea of like, cool, a company paid me to do this. Great. But it's got to go through the filter of me and my ideas and my beliefs and my thoughts. So it's like
Mhm.
that thing where the company, I don't believe in working with like completely morally corrupt companies. I do not like to do that at all. Um, I do know some people like literally have to make a check, and some people literally like don't have a 9 to 5 job that they can like lean on or anything like that. Like content creation is their thing. And that's
Mhm.
another whole thing. But I think me personally, I just try not to work with brands that are morally corrupt. Try not to work with anyone that is like like I think if I can derive personal enjoyment in a way that does not directly route people back to the original thing, I think I've completed something. Um But yeah, I think I would be remiss if I were to like blatantly say like just never play anything that's bad. Never, just don't play bad games. Don't play, because you couldn't have anything. Like you couldn't play FIFA, you couldn't play Tears of the Kingdom, you couldn't play Mario, you couldn't like do anything because everything is built on like blood, sweat and tears, sadly, in one way or another. And
Right.
there's
And we
just
couldn't do this interview because then you
yeah,
have to use the internet. You'd have to use a
yep,
computer. You'd have to like how far does it go, right? That's hard.
exactly. And it's like you can double in on yourself so many times, you're infinitely screwed in this lifetime. Like if you really want to think about like, is everything you do good or bad? You can be infinitely screwed over and over and over thinking about how far back the trace of bad goes. That has to the point where it has nothing to do with you. At some point, it's all quantum physics and stuff, and it's like literally just like okay, two atoms, like not even two atoms, but atoms came together, created me, and then a series of choices and events happened from that point on, or series of choices and events created the earth, that created the environment, that created the world, that created the city, that created this, like, you know, all the house, that, you know, whatever. And you can continue doing that forever. But I think at some point you have to take a step back and be like, where is my joy at? And does my joy have anything to do with this company? Um, and I don't know. I think still doing the harm and the good from that, branching from that, because I think there's definitely a way to be selfish. Like that's the selfish thing of being like, I can still do this and I can find personal joy in it and be different and not perpetuate the ideas of the original bad thing. But then it's from there, okay, but am I going to perpetuate the bad ideas or am I going to go off in my own direction and find a way to break this that still makes me happy? Because yeah, I don't know. I think sometimes you should choose yourself. I think sometimes, every once in a while,
It is a very tough balance.
Yeah.
And there's it's just impossible to answer.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you have to selectively use the ignorance is bliss principle,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to just be at 51% peace with yourself.
Yes.
Like it's never going to be a
100.
perfect thing. People are looking at like what you said about we're not meant to be creators or influencers. That's so true. Like I don't think our lizard brains are able to comprehend like the thousands of like named and unnamed people that are just dropping things on us like you should do this,
Yes.
Lexi shouldn't do that. Like, have you thought about this?
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about that? I think this is right. This other person says I think this is completely wrong.
Yeah.
Like we just can't process that as humans.
Even
It's
just being
so hard.
under constant watch. Like the idea
Yes.
that like
It's like a self-imposed surveillance.
it
Almost.
is. And I think like where people lose empathy is that we choose to become influencers. We choose to become content creators. But I think there's a part of me too, like if you could be the best you could be at something, would you not be the best? Like I want to perform on stages. I want to be like I went into computer science, but I love musical theater. I love performing. I love acting. I love all of that kind of music, everything like that. The reason I chose D&D and tabletop in general was because it scratched that itch of like the logical part of world building mixed with I get to do cool voices and I get to be
It's a very
dynamic.
like interesting multidisciplinary thing. That's
Yeah.
what people often don't recognize about TTRPGs because they get stuck on the level one of this is a fantasy game where you like hang out with your friends and roll some dice. It's not like that. This
Exactly.
is simply a vessel for storytelling.
Yeah.
For this actually what you called in another interview, you called DMing like a kind of service, right? And now I'm
Yeah.
just like connecting the dots because like there is, would you say there's a little bit of you that's like service oriented and maybe people pleasing, and that translates to being a dungeon master or
Exactly.
DM?
That's exactly it. Like I think there is a part of me that wants to deliver the exact story that someone didn't know they needed. Like my favorite moments are the moment after
That's the pleasure, or that's the
exactly.
joy, right?
Like the moment after I finish a session and everyone's like, "Whoa." Like because they thought they knew how a story was going to go or even they knew how the story was going to go, but playing it out with me there was different and could not have happened any other way.
Like surpassing expectations that they had
Yeah.
on maybe themselves on
Yeah.
what they had.
Yeah. And I think like telling stories is very natural. And I don't think like I think the one thing I want to clarify is that I'm not saying like the people who stream it and the people who are famous for it are the best at what they do. I know plenty of like one of my favorite DMs is a guy who he streams campaigns, but he like he's not in it to be like a Matt Mercer or like in it for any of that kind of stuff. He just like wants to tell stories and loves that he can tell stories with his friends. And he's one of the best DMs I've ever had. And it like it's wild because there's so many people out there like that I will run into them at a store and be like, "Oh my god, I'm enamored with your
like
story."
Unsung heroes or heroines.
Exactly.
Basically.
But I think that that's also a thing too where like we're just going in two different directions. Like I could have played D&D and ran D&D and if I was someone who did not enjoy the stage, I would have just done the normal personal, like, I am happy to just tell stories with my friends and tell as many stories as possible and that kind of thing. But I'm someone who enjoys the stage, so I took a diversion. And so from here on out, it sucks because, like, that diversion was into content. Not sucks. I don't want to say that. But, like, the diversion was into content creation. It was into, like, I want to be seen and I want to share my stories and I want to, like, bring myself to the people and share myself with them, and hopefully, same as if I was playing a game at home with a few friends, I want all of those people to have watched this story and watched that part of me that I put out there and leave changed in a good way. And it's like there's no difference in skill between me and someone who's doing it at home for their friends. It's just the intent. And that's also another reason why content creation influencing is not natural and normal, because like it's just not something that was an option before.
Right.
And now you can just hit stream on Twitch and do it. And that is wonderful, and the accessibility for everyone is wonderful. I also think that it puts immense pressure on you to put yourself out as a product.
Yes.
And therefore you end up working with people you don't want to, or even just like saying yes to everything, like what I did when I first came in, say yes to everything because you think it'll open up into an opportunity, and you just never know. But it leads you to make irrational decisions because you're
Yes.
trying to be seen. You're trying to do this thing. You're trying to make yourself a product.
Yes. It has commoditized who we are as people.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be lying to you if I said I didn't care about how many people are going to listen to this episode or how many views it's going to get on YouTube.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I don't think any creator is honest when they say they don't read the comments or they don't look at the numbers. Like, you have to be you almost have to be like wired completely, built completely different to not care about these things. For the vast majority of us,
Yeah.
that's what we are. Like, there's been structures created where we have to think about it now.
Yep.
Like it's designed that way.
Yeah.
And it's because I'm a little bit older than you. I'm in my early 40s. I should say I'm a lot older than you. But I remember a time when I didn't go to school with a laptop.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a mobile phone. Like, I got these things when I was in my early 20s, right? Because that was when the internet era was starting. And that just feels like an aeon ago now.
Yeah.
That I just and I, not to be like old man on the hill, but it's like I think it must be even harder for folks who like grew up with a mobile phone in their hand. Like, how does one even process it? Like, I'm completely brainwashed into Twitter and social and content, and I had a world before that. So how does one even begin, you know?
It's impossible. It's impossible. It truly is. And I think it's something like people on Broadway, people in the performing arts, they're used to this kind of thing and they still don't have it figured out. Like, they still we're just now getting the care technicians on sets to make sure that performers are taken care of. There was this very interesting like mini documentary about a Shakespeare company that was doing like an all black production. I think it was Macbeth or Hamlet. But there was an actual like person on like part of the company that was important, just as important as the dramaturge, just as important as the director, who's making sure that everyone is like, when you leave, because your body doesn't know how to not react. Like, you in your mind, you're saying, I am playing a character who is going through heartbreak. But sadly, those thoughts convince your body and your mind like that it's going through heartbreak. And then you get home.
It's the
And
same
you're
thing.
like,
Your brain is feeling it. Yes.
exactly. And it's like theater people have started to figure it out, and they've started getting resources. There are not a lot of resources for people who are content creators and streamers, especially if you did not have a life before. I was like I'm a Gen Z, I think I am. Where I was like play outside till the lights turned on, but also we had VHS tapes that then turned into DVDs that then turned into CDs that, like, not even CDs, but DVDs that turned into streaming, whatever. Like, I had a cell phone very later on in my childhood, but I also was like a kid that grew up watching like Rugrats and stuff like that. So like I was like half in, half out, and
Yep.
it's been hard because like I grew up being like, oh, I want to be a celebrity. And then halfway through my life, becoming a celebrity became very easy because YouTube existed. And you just had
Yeah.
random people getting famous on
That's
YouTube.
the positive part of it, is like it has empowered people to
Yeah.
like for example, Nathan, who interviewed you,
Mhm.
like, this is amazing. And I feel like maybe like a decade ago he wouldn't even be able to have his own TTRPG thing, his own
Yeah.
podcast, and just show the world what an amazing talent and voice he is.
Yeah.
And it's just like that democratization of, that's the good, but then along with the good comes the whole like nobody's really trained on how to process all this stuff, right?
Yeah. And I think it's another thing where the same way with theater, your brain, you play as if you are, heartbroken or like going to murder someone or have just been murdered or whatever, and your mind can't turn it off. Your heart doesn't know how to turn it off. Your body doesn't know how to stop reacting. Now we have a generation of people who stream on Twitch, and you play games with people and you're laughing and you're having the time of your life. And for tabletops, was like Magic, I think you're just playing with people. That's great. Tabletop, you're literally putting on another skin
It's
to
a whole
do it.
nother level.
And then
It's
you
not,
hit
yeah.
then you hit end call and you're sitting there in your room and your dog's barking and you're in a messy room and you're
It's
back
like you
in
were just in
reality.
this like simulation
Exactly.
of something real, which is real in your head,
Yeah.
and it becomes real, and then suddenly you're just like drop shipped back into like this cold sterile room. I mean, maybe your room is not cold and sterile, but like I'm just trying to make the analogy, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And it's like I don't think that
abrupt.
yeah, I don't think like I think there are not a lot of resources. I have a friend my friend they're on Twitter as at Scalar Sailor Scout Austin. They're like a therapist, like a real life therapist who talks about therapy and like bringing your healthiest self to tabletop, and has really helped me establish my own rituals. But there was a period of time where I went to my therapist and I was like, I don't know if you can help me with this, but I feel so alone. Like I feel so alone because I play games with my friends and then I hit end stream and I'm just sitting there and I'm back to real life. And it's like it's
I'm
not
so connected, but I'm so alone.
I'm so
That
alone.
whole
I'm
that
so
that
connected,
weird
but I'm so alone.
dichotomy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like that's what social media has done. And good, definitely like good and bad happening there. And I think like sadly as content creators, because we want to be seen, and it stinks to even say it like that, but it's like the same drive that drives someone to the stage. Um you want to be seen, you want people to be changed because of what you do, and you also want to be changed.
There's that ego in there. Like, I believe that what I say matters. I believe that my voice is valuable. Therefore, I want to be seen or to be heard, right?
Yeah. Truly that's exactly it. And I think that's like we said, that's not bad, but it's something that we have in us. And I think to lose empathy for people who choose that is not okay. And I think on top of that, like it would be like me being like, oh, you want to be a coder and you want to go code for a big company? Like, why would you do that? Like, how, when it's like sometimes going to a bigger company and coding at a bigger company is how you actually get your hands on like the next tech that's coming, or how you start actually being more creative because you have to do it in a very short timeline. Fairly exploitative, same exact way, like not same exact way, but like very similar to content creation, where a lot of it is exploitation of the self in order to like benefit,
or just hashtag capitalism.
yes, exactly. But I think like that's like if it brings you joy to be in the forefront of your area, then I think like content creation and having to do what we do is tough, but it's like very similar. And I think it's like I'm trying to clarify. It's not that coding is the same as content creation, or like content creators go through the same thing that people in 9 to 5 jobs go through, but they're different experiences, and it comes around to like we're all on a journey, and we all like, some people would like to be seen, some people want themselves to be seen and really enjoy that idea and enjoy the idea of sharing. And like, I wouldn't go off on a screenwriter or like a someone who's like behind the scenes, but like their stuff is getting put on, like a playwright, like someone who's writing the thing that gets put on and then they go and watch their thing get put on. Like, you wouldn't yell at them for like being excited about their thing being put out there. But like, I think content creation is a very similar thing, specifically in tabletop, where it's like we have ideas, not a lot of money, so we literally have to make ourselves into a product so people can take a chance on us to start, getting some of the productions of the stories out there.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think creators are different, but I feel like I do it because I want to be seen, I want to be heard, but I also do it because I want the guest to be seen, the guest to be heard. And for me, it's very simple. Like, yeah, sure, I could do this interview with you and publish it to 3 of my friends, and that's it. And I think there would be a lot of satisfaction in it. For example, I enjoy the moment doing it right now in the moment, but I'm also kind of egotistical or selfish or whatever you want to call it. Like, I want it to scale. Mm-hmm. I want it to use a software term. I want it to go out to as many people as I can, because I feel like what you have to say in this episode is going to touch somebody, right? Or what you and I are doing in terms of an exchange is going to touch somebody. And I would rather go out to 10,000 people than 3 people. And that's why I'm a creator. But I have to accept that in that act of intentionally wanting to scale, I have to deal with the internet. I have to have people comment on it in a good and a bad and an ugly way. And it's just, I guess the question here is like, have you considered taking your storytelling, like, and just making some of it private? Because I've thought about sometimes, it's like, okay, what if I interview someone whom I'm curious to interview, but maybe there's no redeeming quality from the interview because that person is toxic or whatever it is, but I'm just really curious. Should I just do it anyways? And just if a tree fell in the forest, should I just not release it? Have you thought about I'm not saying you're going to do anything toxic. This is a terrible analogy, but I'm just saying, have you thought about like doing content that's just private, or maybe just going back to being a DM that's only doing it in their store and just not turning the camera on? Or, like, there's almost something like pure about it now in this day and age of doing that, right?
Yeah. And I have like 2 home games that alternate on Tuesdays that are like my game, that I'm like, one is an in-person that I'm like, if I'm gonna use
You've
my
done
dice,
it. You now made it public. You have uttered it.
I know it exists now. But like, I have an in-person game and I have a like online game with some other tabletop creators in the space that are just like, it's just us, like truly just us. And then one of my friends from like real life that plays in both. She's my everything, but truly like taking back storytelling for myself, and also like something I like to do. I like to write scripts. So that's also something that I do for myself, that I don't sell them. I don't post them. I also don't finish them. So it's okay. Like, it's not for anyone else.
They haven't been made into movies yet.
Exactly.
Like into the public sphere, right?
Exactly. Okay. So a lot of it is like finding ways to take my time for myself and take back my creativity. And I think I do a lot of DMing for other people, but a lot of what I do is thinking about like my world, like my Strixu campaign. It's Strixu exists. Strixhaven exists in Magic. It exists in D&D, but also like something very interesting about Strixu, you will notice that some of the players have dropped little bits of lore into the episodes, especially like the season that's coming out, because some of them are playing in the world. So I found a way to take it out of Arcavios, which is the world that they made for Strixhaven, for like in WotC made for Strixhaven, and I've put it into my world and established its own history. And so for some of the people, I'm like most of the day,
it's now a living organism that's like
that connects to me, like my own thing, rather than it being like a thing that's for everyone else. Like, I'm just DMing this because it's a standalone thing. It's like, no, this is going to actually change my world and change how my players view my world. And so there are some players that are like, does Strixhaven exist yet? And like they'll play in my world and they're like, does Strixhaven exist? And I'm like, no, actually it's a little floating tiny island over here and the dragons haven't found it yet. So like, good luck trying to figure out when that's going to happen. Or like, I'll be like, oh, this is a post Strixu era. So like whatever. And it's like a very fun thing that now, like, I've made Strixhaven from this book that was put out and from the cards that were put out. I've turned it from that into being something that is a literal canon in my world that I can talk about and it not be attached to a company. It's attached to me. And like, in order to understand and know the story and be able to predict anything about Strixhaven, you can't like have read the books or just played the game and sit down at my table and be like, I know Strixhaven. No, you have to know me. You have to like go through the filter of me and
Have
how
to know
I've
you,
done
have
it.
to know your version of it,
Yeah.
your world of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's like it has nothing to do with like even watching Strix U. It's just no, like mine is a little different, like very not even a little, very different, and it's based off of how I interpret the idea of a magical college. But yeah, it taking back storytelling for myself and really taking like doing it personally has been something I've had to fight for a very long time, but I've found like so many ways to do it in a quality not quantity way, that brings me so much joy and makes it so I actually look forward to DMing both for myself, like my personal games, and for like those games where it's like this is someone else's world or this is another like this is a module for a company or like whatever.
How did you become a storyteller in the first place?
Ooh. Feel like it definitely comes down to like I was writing nonstop because I was watching like a bunch of like I was watching a bunch of things. That's all you could do as a kid is like watch things during the summer, go outside and play, and then you're making believe that you are those things. And then you read books. Like I was an avid reader growing up. Like would read through so many different books and just chew through catalogs, like chew through any sort of library I was set in. Um, and it just got to the point I was like, oh, people are writing this. I could write this. Or like I'd be like, I don't like how the story went. I'm going to write my own. And it led to me and my brother sitting down when I was very young, when we were both very young. He's like 2 years older than me. And we just started typing out the story. We started coming up with this story and we called it Time. And it was literally just about teens who could like, these teens who all went to the same school and they realized that their parents were like superpowered individuals and all together, when they all worked together, they could stop time. And there was very blatant and obvious self-inserts of like which one we were. Like you could tell, like if I laid out the characters, you could easily tell who like
there's a character named Rexy and
exactly. Like it was literally that, like, but there was also like we just weren't thinking about it. We were just having so much fun. Like one of the main characters, his name was Gray. And then the character that was my self-insert, she had an older brother, air quotes, like my older brother, but I named him Silver. So we had two characters, main characters, one named Gray and one named Silver. We did not notice this till we were old and going back and looking at this story. But we were just having fun. It was like 10,000 or something words that we would sit down and write like a chapter a day and then argue about how the chapter would go and keep typing. And
wow, that's intense.
Yeah, and like I think I've said this story before. I loved saying the story though because my mom talks about how one time she was at work and I called her and I'm crying and I was crying. I'm crying and she's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "Gabe said that he's gonna have the right to the movie when we get older." And I want the rights to the movies, or we have to split them. I'm in like the 4th grade. Like I'm already becoming a property
it's like the
lawyer.
things kids say.
I know.
Yeah.
And so I think it started very young of like realizing we had control over like creative control over these things. And we weren't worried if it was good or bad. Like objectively it was bad, but we wrote like 11,000 words because we were just like,
when you're in it, you're in it.
Yeah.
Right? That's a masterpiece is going to be made into a movie.
Exactly. And it's like, it's one of those things like it was no doubt. We were like, this is who's going to play us. And like immediately we had no second guess about like how good a thing has to be in order to be made into a movie or any of that kind of stuff. And it's interesting because like, I feel like I haven't written anything as good as that since, which is wild to say.
You peaked.
I peaked.
Okay.
I peaked in the 4th grade. Like, I feel like I haven't written anything as good as that. And I don't know. I think it mainly has to do with the fact that like I was so uh unburdened by the idea of being good. I just had to be creative, and I just had to be as creative as my brother was, if not more. And like a chapter would get done a day or in a couple of days. And we would yell and talk about like, oh, well, it needs to be like this, or like I want this character to do this, and we would find a middle ground. Um, but I really feel like it started there with like my older brother right there being the creative force that was driving me to be creative. And ever since then I just like that was the point I feel like I remember earliest. But I know I was writing a lot before then. I was like avid reader, avid writer, but that's like the most vivid moment where I was like I'm going to be a storyteller. Like I
That
have
was
to
when
make
it
movies.
came together in this like very focused effort, and it was also collaboration with Gabe, your brother,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And it just kept like literally kept doing that. I kept getting older and kept writing, and I would write these very bad stories or fan fiction even, which is a very weird thing, but like fan fiction or even scripts that were bad, like terrible. And I go back now and I'm like, I wrote so many of these. Like I wrote so many and they're all bad, but I didn't care. And I was so excited, and I would get other people excited to be a part of it. Um because of my passion, even though we didn't realize it was bad. Or maybe they realized it, but they just wouldn't tell me. But I think like everything spawns back from that moment.
Hmm. Well, you have a gift. So, full disclosure, I thought about interviewing you like many, many months ago
Yeah.
when I was physically in LA and just chatting with Joe Johnson.
Oh my gosh.
We were like just walking along the street. We actually hung out for like 4 hours that day.
Yeah.
He was just
Joe is the
an
best.
amazing person to
Yeah.
talk to, literally the best. Joe Johnson, aka Black Nito. He has a show called Tabletop
Mhm.
Jocks, which I that was the first time I saw you on in anything was on his in that was it called one shot or four shot
Yeah.
campaign?
Oh my gosh, my
Yeah.
famous four shots. That's my favorite kind of campaign. I just like I love doing 4 episodes of something. That's a perfect amount of
Yeah.
episodes.
But the first thing that Joe told me about you was like he said you should interview Lexi, but it wasn't like Lexi the dungeon master or Lexi the TTRPG person. It was just Lexi is a gifted writer and storyteller, and he told me that you have been, you know, writing movie scripts or like trying to do things outside of TTRPG, and he said he wanted you to go to LA and like finish something. And
Oh.
so can you talk a bit about that? And just because he seems to be the biggest fan of
Oh
yours,
my
and
gosh.
that's why I'm putting the dots together. I'm just like I think this is why, like, I think you're meant to do something on this earth, and it's to tell stories,
Yeah.
right?
Oh my god, that just makes me like I really want to cry hearing that. I'm not joking. I think there's just like oh god, I don't know. I don't even know how to talk about a gift that I have. I don't even know. I think I'm constantly comparing myself, constantly doing the non-egotistical thing, which is or egoist thing, not egotistical, egoist thing, which is like thinking highly of everyone else, but I think there is a huge part of me that wants to like even if like move to LA. Like I move to LA, figure out writing, get a gig, start sweeping the floor at a movie studio and work my way up. Like I am that's like I think my dream job absolutely is like writing specifically. And I've always had these like fantastical stories in my mind. I've never been like a it's only a drama like or whatever. I'm like no, it's a drama but there are dragons, or it's a drama like favorite story idea I've been working on this forever is just like these four black girls who grew up playing D&D as kids, and then they get older and they realize like oh shit, our campaign is coming true, and having to just like literally figure out life and come back together as adults and like be okay with who they are as adults and like dealing with loss and disappointment and grief and
That
growth.
sounds like a great show
I
already.
know,
Like
like I
that's like
want
I'm in the pitch. If I'm a producer, you're pitching this to me. I'm just like, let's
yeah,
go.
because like stuff like that once again like a I think stories are the vaccine to true life. And I think in the way that like a vaccine is introduction of the virus in order to be able to bring down your like add resistance to that virus. So like the idea that we can tell a story that has a dragon and it's allegorical for greed, or it's allegorical for um pain or suffering or fatalism, of like things are always going to end in fire whenever I'm around, like that kind of thing. When you meet people that are like that in real life, it's not that you're going to be like, my D&D character said this, or like I saw a TV show where they dealt with it by saying these words. That's not it. But it allows you, like, you've already been through that experience, or you've seen people go through that experience and you've seen them come out unscathed. Or if they did it's because or if they didn't come out unscathed, it's because they made a wrong choice. And in that moment, like a lot of those times, it's that moment where like the person, the monster's behind the door, and there are so many signs saying the monster's behind the door, and the person's like, I'm gonna open the door, and you're like, you're stupid, why would you open the door? It's like there's two reactions, which is I learned because they did it the right way, or I learned because they did it the wrong way. And either way, that brings us, like, I can still think of many TV and movie moments that like taught me lessons as a kid and taught me lessons even now. And so I've always had a heart for like telling stories that specifically allow you to see yourself in those characters and allow you to see complex situations mixed with like magic, or mixed with urban fantasy, or mixed with horror, or mixed with sci-fi, just because like that stuff is super fun to write. But also because it allows you to like take a step back and get lost in a metaphor, and that's very fun and beautiful.
I feel like you have this unique combination where you are a storyteller, you can build the worlds, you can create coherent things, but you also understand that the sum is greater than the individual parts, where you are able to take the community interactions, like social settings, and elevate it as well. So I almost feel like even if your TV show or movie were to be greenlighted, it would almost be too constraining in a
Mm-hmm.
way. Like, let's take aside like material success and what that means, and maybe Halle Berry is playing your character or whatever it is, or the
Yeah,
mother,
exactly.
or or you have like clout with a capital
Yeah,
C, hashtag clout. But it almost feels like you thrive on this sort of interactivity that the traditional mediums don't give you. Is
exactly.
that fair to
That's
say?
exactly it. Like, one of the reasons, like, I think everyone's like, you got to finish your script in order for your script to get made. One of the reasons a lot of my scripts don't get finished is because it's just me sitting at the computer. Like, I love bringing people in on the idea and like talking through and carving out a truth with them and figuring out how to get there. That process is so much fun to me that it's hard for me to sit down and be like, okay, now I got to sit in my room and type for the next 3 weeks.
Hmm.
And also, I'm impatient when it comes to that too, where I'm like, I already see it in my mind, I want it to be done. um but I have this like very visual style, and I have a very collaborative, like, I love working with other people. I love spitballing. I love uh writers rooms where it's like a bunch of us all together. Even in a lot of my games, it's never just me being like, I'm going to show up the day of and give everyone information beforehand. I have carved through and given something to every single
So
player
you did the work, you did the
and
preparation, right?
allowed them to have input on the world they want to play in. Like, the first thing I
Right.
ask people when I like the four shot that I did on Joe's channel, I didn't just like say I'm gonna do a museum four shot. I literally sent out a poll, and the first question on the poll was, "Hey, we've got multiple ideas. Like, I've got multiple ideas for things I would feel comfortable running. Here's four ideas. Pick one.
Hmm.
Pick which one sounds the most
Yeah.
fun." And then we got on a call for a session zero, and in that session zero, I asked everyone what you enjoy about telling stories, and what you find hard about telling stories. And that's how
Yeah.
I figure out
You,
what I'm going to
you
say.
actually took the time to like workshop it, and to almost, if I dare say, to like be comfortable with the loss of control. You're almost like ceding, because I feel like it's interesting, because I feel like whether it's Magic or RPGs, like sometimes in these situations, it's a way for people to manifest the best and worst of their ego and
Mm-hmm.
personality. So I feel like traditionally DMs are very like control oriented,
Mm-hmm.
because literally I'm dictating the world and the story. I'm telling you what to do, and uh some people get off on
Yes.
that, but I feel like you're kind of like taking that to, or you're subverting that expectation. Like, I'm gonna give up control. I'm gonna make you a participant in my
Yep.
story, even though in the end, ultimately, it comes from me. I synthesize the ideas, but I have empathy for who you are as a
Yeah.
character. I'm giving you control,
Yeah.
right? So that we can make a better thing in the end. And I think that's just so hard to do. Like maybe that's the good part of people pleasing or being service oriented is that you can do
Yeah,
that, right?
exactly. And that's exactly it is one, people love being able to write a story. Like most players don't show up to a D&D session knowing that they're going to have a way to like they're going to change the world. Most people don't show up to a session expecting to change a world or expecting to change like how the DM is willing to do things. Like people show up wanting to win a lot of the times, and other people show up along for the ride that the DM is like the DM is rowing and they're on the boat and they're just along for the ride and they're okay and happy to be on the ride. And that's perfectly okay. I think I show up immediately putting a chisel in everyone's hand. And I allow everyone to make a little dent in what I consider to be a story. And at that point it's interesting too cuz a lot of my world building does not like I don't have my entire world carved out. My world is carved out by individuals. And like I there comes a point where I'm like, my world is not ready for not ready for any players. I haven't figured out where these cities are, but also I know I'm gonna add more. And it gets to the point with world building where I cannot build anything else without allowing other people in. And so even my stories work the same exact way. I think about like, oh, what kind of story do I want to tell? What system do I want to use? And it gets to a point where I literally have to let other people in. I have to start asking people if they want to be a part of it because the kind of people that pull up to the game influences the kind of story I want to tell and influences how I even begin to create. Um and I think that's just an acknowledgement, a literal acknowledgement of the fact that like story isn't all me and like my story will never be all me and like any show I output is going to be an amalgam of me and my vision but also each person's vision and like where they want their character to go. And it's interesting because Strixu does the same exact thing where every single episode once we get done, once we cut the cameras, I'm literally on for about half an hour to an hour to 2 hours talking to people about like how do you feel about the session, where do you want your character to go, what are you thinking of doing next, um was this scene okay? How do we feel about this? And then texting everyone in their downtime being like, what's one thing you really, really want to happen next session? Who's one person you really, really want to talk to? And not being afraid to be like, not being afraid of like, I think there's such thing as privacy and secrecy. Secrecy is like, I want to keep these things to myself because it will literally invalidate it will be invalid if I tell someone else other things. And that's like the level of secrecy is something that we as a show have to our viewers. Privacy is another whole thing where I'm like, your character doesn't know this, but you as all players, we all need to acknowledge that this is about to happen or that this person did this thing. Are we okay with this? And it's like we have a level of privacy with each other where we will continue and like we have a right to know this information. Um, and secrecy is that extra step where it's like it literally like it's an extra layer of like between us and the world because we have to make it look easy, you have to make it look good. But like if I just wandered up to a table and was just like I'm gonna do what I want this week, it would go very badly. It would go very, very badly. At least in my heart I feel like it would. And I've been at tables where that's exactly what happens, and I don't like it. I don't like it at all. So
So your approach has been, would you say it's been refined over experience or like observing what has worked and what hasn't worked?
yes, I think it's definitely been refined. I think I started from the beginning as a collaborative. What do you want to play? What are your favorite movies? Like even my first campaign was like the Disney campaign that I talked about, and it's like just a Disney campaign where I drew the map and I placed the characters in places and came up with the cities and the regions that they all lived in and came up with my own story. But that would not like it was still not all me. Like it was me asking my players what are your favorite movies, letting them pick out their characters and then building the story based off of like the characters that they wanted to play. So that's been since the very beginning, but I think over time, especially with the introduction to me of like session zeros and those like and in Magic we have that concept as well of like the rule zero talk, like the rules.
The Rule
Yeah,
Zero, yeah.
that was in tabletop. It's ported over to Magic, and I love it a lot. And I demand it now. Like I literally demand it. Where I'm like, what level are we playing? How are you guys feeling? What kind of deck are you bringing? Do you want to play your most decrepit deck? Great. Thank you for letting me know. Like I'm ready. I'm here to experience that. Um, but
I'm here to
yeah,
experience
I'm
that.
super down. Go for it. Ruin my life. Um, but yeah, truly that's like it's been refined, but it started off with the input and then over time developed into being like more and more defined of like what kind of input people enjoy. Like I found what people actually know and also how to ask the right questions to be like, okay, what was your
Mhm.
favorite movie as a kid? Or like what's the last thing you went to the movie theater for? Or like what video game did you put down? And if someone's like
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild, I'm like, okay, they hate puzzles. Like they hate puzzles. No puzzles in this game. Like that's a skill.
Yeah, yeah. There's the art of like probing into who they
Mhm.
are and also being a good interviewer and like doing the setup.
Mhm.
And I think you're touching on something interesting, which is DMing is a way of is leading. DMing is leadership. But sometimes when you're a leader, how do you how do you manage the different personalities and egos? Like when some people want this and other people want that, like how does that how do you reconcile those things as
I
a
think
leader?
starting with a good understanding of what your foundation is good. I think I am never trying to walk into a story without clarifying, here's who I am, here's how I play, this is how I run things, and here's the boundary of what I will and will not take from people. Like I really don't ever try to work with people who are just like, I don't like working with random people specifically because it's for the same reasons as the rule zero conversation. You might not know who you're playing with, um what kind of deck they're bringing, whatever. And that this applies to Magic too, because I have gotten to the point where I have
Sure.
had to find a play group and really only play with them because playing with strangers has become a hard thing to do. But in person. But I think specifically with tabletop, because we're all performers and the nature of performing is how good you are at the table will allow you to be at another table. Um, there's definitely a lot of ego, but I think validating some of that ego and being like, "Oh, bring that part of yourself," and setting boundaries and being like, "Oh, I don't know if this game is going to go there."
Harnessing it
Yeah,
right in the right
it's
way.
exactly that because I think a lot of people are afraid to be like, "You can't play that character. I'm sorry, that character will not fit at this table." Or saying straight up like, "I don't like that deck." Like I've had to put my foot down both in the tabletop and the Magic space to just be like, "Nope, I actually really don't. I'm not up for experiencing this one actually." And getting
Hmm.
comfortable saying that because you will hate yourself on the other side of the interaction, especially if you put your time, your energy into it, like we are all trying to do, of just creating something good for ourselves and other people. You will put your entire self into it and then get to the other side of it and be like, that was not worth it because I allowed that to happen, it ruined it for me. Or this is not my best work. Or that was my best work, but it's including a person or an ego that I didn't really like. Um, and sometimes it's very visible when someone's like not able to reel in the ego that is at the table. But I think like the best part about being a DM is like learning those leadership skills that allow me to both be very improvisational with like accepting everyone and encouraging everyone, especially if people from like tier one act, like people who have been actors in movies and stuff and have credits on like Amazon and like actual TV
Yeah, they
shows.
they know how it
Yeah, to
works. Yeah.
people who are just like, oh, I've been playing D&D for 3 or 4 years and this is my first tabletop game. You've got experiences from
Yeah.
up to down, and same with Magic. So,
Hey, I think there's nothing wrong with qualification
yep,
criteria for creating the best
yeah,
experience. Just like how for my podcast, it's very simple. Like I don't usually invite people who've never done any
mm-hmm,
podcasts before because they might just be so caught up in like the level, to use a magic analogy, like the level one mechanics of like, how do I speak, or what should I say? How do I present myself? Do I have a
Exactly.
microphone? There's just so much that you can just filter out if you have the right qualification criteria. So I think people who are performers, there's already like something built in.
Hmm.
Like it's just very hard for you to do a public TTRPG thing and just invite someone who only played at the LGS
Yeah.
and has never done it. I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
So, but it's just harder,
Yeah.
right?
And like
So,
I'm a big like I will play with anyone. I do love playing with people, but I think there's
yeah.
a difference in like
It's not about excluding someone, but it's about like how do I create the best
yeah.
content if
And even
that's
just
what you
how
want to do.
I'm feeling. Cause like there are some days where I do go to LGSs and I do just like playing. I like playing with strangers and acting like I do not exist. Like my name does not exist. Or
Mm.
even online, like I've joined discords where people are playing magic over spell table and I just change my name and play the game as much like you can call me Lexi, we're good, and just play because it's fun. Or even D&D games where it's charity and I don't like it's not about the people, or even streamed games where I've never worked with people before, but like I just gotta hope that like even though they're asking questions, I've got the energy to answer them. I think it's more so about me than them. Like if I had a group of four new people asking me to run a game for them, especially this happens in real life a lot where I'm like, yeah, I'll run D&D for you whenever, just let me know. I do it all the time, but it's because I know I when I say I do that, like when I say I will do that, I have the capacity to deal with the new or deal with the maybe inexperienced or answer the questions or whatever, because I have that capacity. Whereas if it was about them, I don't think I would ever play with anyone new. I don't think I would, and that's I think a lot of people who are like kind of bigger in Magic have gotten to that point, and bigger in tabletop too, have gotten to the point where they refuse to play with strangers. And I have the time and the energy sometimes, and I'm more than willing to make that happen for strangers. But I think like there's a part of me that's also just like sometimes I want the
Sure.
thing that I pitched to be the thing that I pitched, and that means like
Yep.
getting like certified performers, getting certified like someone who knows how to work a stream, like knows how to work Twitch, knows how to work
Yep.
all of those things. So
There's no issue with
yeah,
that. If Erica Badu should be the lead
yep,
actress or singer on this
exactly,
track,
exactly.
like it should be Erica Badu. It should not be
Yeah, we're
somebody
getting
else.
Hans Zimmer. We're
Yeah.
not getting a high schooler that figured out how to compose with a little
Yes.
piano. Like we gotta get the Hans Zimmer in.
Yeah. Obviously, you've always been yourself. You've always been Lexi. But can you speak on what it's like to be a female person in this space, or even a black female
Hmm.
person in this space? Like, obviously, you've always just been yourself. So it's hard to like out of
Like
body, like, oh,
quantify it.
if
Yeah,
I were somebody else, yeah.
yeah.
But what are your thoughts about this in terms of TTRPGs or the gaming content space?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely weird because I've noticed it a lot more in the space. And I think it's not from the good people, interestingly enough. It's never from the good people that I remember, oh, I'm black, I'm femme, I'm all of these things. Cool, 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 cool. It's mostly people that are consuming me as a product and are not willing to see past the fact that I am like a human person. But I think my experience, for the most part, it's interesting because like I have a mentor who they're like a phenomenal person, very like in tune with the space and how it has changed over the years, specifically in tabletop. And it's funny because like they were like, you are a brown femme person. You are like attractive, you are personable, you are all these things. Here's what's going to happen. Like the second that you hit live on that Twitch stream, here's what's going to happen. And literally broke down how companies would approach me, how people would approach me, how like white groups would approach me and try to like take advantage of the fact that I'm a person of color for their casts or for their games or whatever, and what it was going to be like. And like not in all of a negative way, but just in a way to be like, hey, I've seen this happen many and multiple times. This is probably how it's going to go. And it's very funny because everything came true. So it's like I said, it's usually, I don't really, it's not that I don't remember, but like I'm usually in good company for the most part. So I don't think about it until I'm like out of good company. And I feel like, just a little out of place, like very, very like a black sheep, if for lack of better words, like just a very out of place person. But even then, I think there's just a huge part of me that's just like I think my experience as a black femme person like in this space has just told me like I can't be in a space where there are not other people of color, where there are not other femmes. Like I refuse to be a part of it. I don't play any D&D games where it's like all guys, or even like if it's like even if it's like all white people. And that sounds like very weird and probably very controversial, but I refuse to do it just because I cannot be the person that will consistently be teaching everyone about how to be in relationship with me and how to be in correlation with me. That's a burden and it's on its own right, and I think like it is not my issue to have to teach everyone all the time. And if you were a one person, or even like one femme person, one queer person, one whatever, in the room with a bunch of people who have never had to think about that, like you're gonna always be the teacher, and always trying to like be chill enough to be up to their standards because they're setting the bar, not you.
I think it's tough because not that I'm femme or black, but I have felt it maybe
Mm-hmm.
differently as an Asian person or a minority person. But I think it's just tough because just right away, based on what we look
Mm-hmm.
like, there are expectations on what we need to be as role
Yep.
models. There are expectations on we need to speak for our culture or our
Exactly.
group. Whereas the default, if you're not one of
Mm-hmm.
us, you don't have to do any of that. You don't have to explain yourself. And there's an extra, this is not woe is me, but there's an extra mental burden. Sometimes you just want to have fun.
Yeah.
You just want to be
It's
in the
mental
thing. You just want
load.
to be in
Yeah.
it, as we said. And but there's always this other thing that's like sort of hanging there. And then the way to alleviate that is like you said, maybe it's like I'll call it game selection or like people selection. It's like if you're with a bunch of other, like if I'm with a whole bunch of other Asian folks or I'm with a diverse group, then there isn't
Burden.
that mental
Yeah.
load, or there just isn't, right? And it just that's just facts. And I think we need to recognize
Yeah.
that, you know.
And I think it's definitely a thing where like everyone's always going to be learning more. I'm learning more even about the black experience. I'm learning more about the queer experience. I'm learning more. And it's like it doesn't it doesn't it doesn't harm as much as it would if I were like there's this person on I'm gonna go on a tangent here. There's this person on TikTok that's been recounting their issue, like they were it's this like white woman who she's just like breaking down because for Mother's Day, she and her sister who's a mother and their mother all had to plan Mother's Day and their husbands didn't do any planning. And they were like, even if this was Father's Day, we'd probably still be doing planning, even though all of them are fathers. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And it's an extra load and burden. And this person broke it down and was like, this is kind of explaining the fact that, like, one, there's emotional load here, but then that person had another TikToker where they're talking about, like, if you are someone who is in a minority group and you are deciding to go not the default route at all, but like if you are a person of color who's deciding to date a white person who came from privilege and they just like never had to think about diversity or whatever, then you have to know that you have now agreed from this point onward to always be the person teaching them about how to be in correlation with you. And it's like that does not stop. Like even if they get comfortable with you, they still have a lot to learn about culture, a lot to learn about how you exist in other groups, how you interact with other groups. And you'll continue to become part of other groups the longer you stay alive. So it's just one of those things that like you are signing up for an emotional burden, and it's not always a bad thing because I think everyone needs to be taught. Everyone has more to learn, and everyone deserves a bit of patience. But I think in these spaces where the goal is to make content I'm proud of, I have to feel comfortable and I have to feel like I'm having fun, and that's always my like my bar. If I feel comfortable and if I feel like I'm going to have fun, I will do the thing. But if one of those things are invalidated, and usually it's invalidated at tables where it's like all white people and I'm the only person of color, or all guys and I'm the only like femme person. It's that's where I'm like, really don't like this. And I feel uncomfortable, and I feel like I'm gonna have to teach, or someone's gonna make a joke, and I'm gonna be sitting there alone, being like, "There's no other person of color I can like cut my eyes to be like, like the Jim Halpert stare at the camera moment." But like, truly, it's I don't know. I think it's a very specific thing that we know because we are people of color, but outside of us, it's not acknowledged in any like official capacity. So
Lexi, so much more
we
we
could
can
talk for
talk on,
hours.
but I want to thank you. I truly believe that. I truly believe that there might be a part two, three,
Yes.
four in the future. Hopefully, if you're up for it. Thank you for doing the thing with me today, and thank you for being you. And maybe the last thing I'll say is like, are there any plugs you want to make, or any, or just tell people where to find you on the internet if they don't already know where
Yeah,
to find
I
you.
mean, you can find me on the internet everywhere as at Black Girl Mage. I play Magic, I run D&D, I run a bunch of other games, but right now I'm the dungeon master for the all black HBCU inspired Strixhaven campaign called Strix U. The only reason I'm throwing that out as a plug is because we just filmed our finale recently, so we will be posting those episodes very soon. Meaning, keep an eye out for that. That's the main thing I'm doing. Outside of that, I'm just here to sit in this space
Just
and
present,
yeah,
just
be
here.
present and just be here.
Nice. Well, Lexi, have a great, wonderful rest of the evening where you are.
Thank you. I will. You too. You too. Have a wonderful day.